Hi, I'm Odellin. My parents kicked me out the same night they learned I lost my job. Not even a phone call, just a manila folder and a message. Figure it out. They said my sister told them everything. What they didn't know was that I'd been paying their mortgage behind the scenes for years. What they still don't know is what I did next. Tell me, have you ever been punished for giving too much? Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. It was still light outside when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The Missouri air had started to cool, leaves just beginning to bronze at the edges. I sat in my car for a moment longer than I needed to, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, trying to summon a version of myself that looked fine, put together, unbothered. A bakery box sat in the passenger seat beside me, pumpkin rolls dusted with powdered sugar, my mother's favorite this time of year. I'd brought groceries too, green beans, butter, boxed wine. Even after losing my job 3 weeks ago, I couldn't walk into this house empty-handed, not when I'd spent the past decade trying to earn a seat at a table I was born into. Inside, the house was already buzzing. The kitchen smelled like sage and roast chicken. My sister Vera's voice rang out first, high-pitched, performative, followed by a soft laugh from her husband, Glenn. "Oh, Dylan," my mom called from the stove without looking up. "You're early, sweetie. You can set the table." I smiled, swallowing that familiar pang. Of course. Vera was already at the dining room, adjusting place cards. Yes, she made place cards for Sunday dinner now. When I got there, I noticed the seating arrangement immediately. Everyone had a cushioned dining chair, except for one metal folding chair stuck at the end of the table. My name card sat neatly in front of it. I blinked once, then again. "Did we run out of chairs?" I asked lightly. Vera smiled without turning. "Well, you haven't really been around much. Thought it'd make sense for the end." I placed the plates down carefully, pretending the words didn't sting. Dinner began with the usual small talk. Dad griping about taxes, Mom asking Glenn about his consulting firm. No one asked how I was. When we were halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat gently. "So, I have some news." That silenced the clinking of silverware. "I was laid off 3 weeks ago. It was sudden, department restructuring." There was a pause, then my mom gasped, but not with worry. "Oh my," she said, sipping her wine. My father looked over his glasses, then down again. Nothing, not even a "we're sorry." Vera blinked twice, dramatically, then leaned closer to Glenn with a stage whisper loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, that explains the jeans. I told you she'd be spiraling." I kept my tone steady. "I'm okay. I've been applying. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you all to know." That's when Vera spoke. Really spoke. Her voice suddenly sharp, slicing through the room like a cold wind. "That's why I told them you were unreliable. No job, no mortgage, no man." I turned to her. "Excuse me?" She shrugged. "I mean, come on. It's not like you've ever carried real weight in this family." My father chimed in then, eyes still on his plate. "Maybe it's time you stop depending on us." I nearly laughed. "Depending? I paid your property taxes last year when the house almost went into lien." No one responded. That's when my mother finally looked up, slowly placing her wine glass on the table. "We think it's best if you take some time away. Get your bearings, figure things out." A chill ran down my spine. Vera stood up and pulled a manila envelope from her purse, sliding it toward me across the table like a waitress dropping off a check. "We packed up your things. Your old room's being converted into a meditation space. Glenn's idea." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at my father, then my mother, then Vera. Not a single one met my gaze. Then I looked down at the cold metal chair beneath me. Suddenly, it all made sense. I took a long breath, steadying my voice. So this is it. I lose a job, and I lose my family. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just stood, the metal folding chair scraping sharply against the hardwood as I pushed it back. I reached for my purse, which was the only thing I'd brought. Out of habit, I guess, not need. And then I said as evenly as I could manage, "Thanks for dinner. I won't stay where I'm not welcome." No one moved. Not a hand lifted. Not a word followed. I walked to the door, my heels sounding louder than usual on the old floor. As I stepped outside into the evening chill, I spotted a U-Haul van parked on the curb. Vera leaned against the porch railing with her arms crossed like she'd been waiting to deliver the final punch. "We already moved your boxes," she said, smirking. "They're in the hallway of your old place, if you still have the keys." She didn't wait for me to respond, just turned back into the house like I'd been dismissed. The sky was darkening fast. Streetlights flickered on in patches. I walked down the steps and opened my car, sitting for a moment in silence before starting it. There was no place to go but back to the apartment I hadn't set foot in for months. It used to be mine. At least I thought it was. The drive wasn't long, maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like I was rolling back the years with every turn. That little building in the south part of town. I had bought it back when Mom and Dad were struggling with mortgage payments, using my savings because they were too proud to accept charity. At the time, I thought I was helping preserve family dignity. Now, as I pulled into the parking lot and saw the flickering hallway light above the front door, all I could feel was dread. I walked up to the front entrance and reached for the mailbox out of habit. There it was, in block letters, V. Arliss. Not me. My stomach dropped. "Odalyn?" a voice called. I turned to see Mr. Romero from Unit 2B. He gave me a polite smile. "Didn't expect to see you back. Your sister said she owned the place now." I tried to keep my face neutral. Yeah, things change fast. Inside the building, I headed toward my old unit. In the hallway sat a stack of cardboard boxes, hastily taped, some leaning, one already half split open. On the side of one box, in thick black marker, someone had written, "Useless stuff." I knelt beside them. There was no lock on the apartment door, just a note taped to it that said, "Utilities off." I let myself in. The air was musty. The space was empty aside from a few scuff marks on the floor where furniture had been dragged out. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, my legs folding beneath me. I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to nothing. Then I noticed an old file box tucked between two stacks of dishware and tangled cords. I reached over and opened it. Inside were folders, envelopes, old bills, and a sealed white envelope marked "Closing Arliss Unit B2. I opened it slowly. Inside were the original mortgage documents. My name on the deed, my signature, my bank statements showing the down payment, and then the date, March 2017. That unit had been mine. I sat back. My fingers tingled with disbelief. The world spun a little slower as I pieced it all together. Vera had told everyone I left the apartment, told them she'd taken over, told them I gave it up for the family. And then she'd lied about my job, my finances, my mental state, twisting every inch of generosity I'd given them into a rope to hang me with. I stared at the folder. All this time I thought I was invisible, but I was never invisible to them. I was just convenient. And now I was disposable. The early light crept in through the blinds as I sat on the floor, the same envelope still cradled in my lap. Sleep hadn't come. Not really. My mind had replayed Vera's words on loop. "You were always the weakest link." And now here I was, the one they'd left behind but still tethered to everything they benefited from. I finally stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and walked to the kitchen. The coffee maker sputtered, stubborn as ever, but the familiarity helped settle my nerves. I opened the envelope, again. My name stared back from the page. Mortgage agreement, down payment record, all of it in my handwriting. Back then, the house had been on the brink, our parents behind on taxes, threatening to sell. I'd stepped in. I used nearly all my savings. Vera said, "Let's put your name down for now. We'll adjust later when things are stable." I believed her. That phrase would haunt me. I clipped the documents together, grabbed my coat, and drove to the county recorder's office. The parking lot was mostly empty. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed above rows of beige cubicles. A clerk named Janice greeted me without looking up. "I'm looking for the deed records for 207 Pinewood Circle," I said, handing her my ID. She typed, paused, typed again. Her lips pressed into a line. "Well, Miss Arliss, according to this, the property deed was transferred 3 years ago to a Vera Arliss." My mouth dried out. But I steadied myself. Is the mortgage attached? Janice clicked another few times. It's still under your name. That's not typical. Deed and loan should match unless someone refinanced improperly. Improperly? I swallowed that word like a splinter. Janice printed the file, and I read the numbers. $196,000 still outstanding. Interest climbing, late fees pending. If Vera defaulted, I was liable. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was legal, financial, lasting. I thanked Janice, walked out slowly, and sat in my car. I needed answers. Not next week, not tomorrow. Today. The bank, where the original loan had been refinanced, was on Main. I walked in, palms sweaty, heart pounding harder than I'd expected. A manager named Mr. Collins greeted me, polite but professional. I'd like to review the mortgage file for 207 Pinewood, I said. I believe there's been a mistake. He asked for ID. Then he disappeared into the back. When he returned, he had a folder in hand and a concerned look. Ma'am, this is unusual. The file shows a refinance was done 2 years ago. The name, Social Security, matches yours. But the signature... He turned the form around. That's not how I sign, I said immediately. No, he agreed. That's why we're careful with this. Would you like to request a fraud investigation? We keep signing footage on file. My mouth moved, but no sound came. He must have taken that as a yes because he began filling out a form. I walked out shaking. Vera hadn't just manipulated our parents. She'd forged my signature, refinanced a property under my financial identity, and left me on the hook. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a felony. Back at the apartment, I closed the door gently behind me and dropped everything to the floor. I didn't cry. That was the strange part. Instead, I sat down and reached for my old leather-bound journal. I started writing. Everything. Dates, conversations, phone calls, transfers, every receipt I'd ever saved. I listed it all in one place. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. I wasn't ready to file anything yet. I just needed to understand what this all meant, what power I really had left. She listened carefully, asked for copies of my documents, and then said something I didn't expect. You may have a case for fraud, property theft, and identity misuse, but more importantly, you have power you didn't realize. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman looking back, but I was starting to remember her. Power I didn't realize? I was starting to remember who I used to be. 2 days later, I was back in my lawyer's office, sitting across from the same woman who'd calmly laid the groundwork for justice. Her tone was still measured, but sharper now, as if she too sensed the undercurrent of something much darker. We'll send a formal cease and desist to your sister regarding the property and identity fraud, she explained, sliding a document toward me, and request access to all mortgage and refinance paperwork. Quietly. No need to tip your hand just yet. I nodded. Quiet. Got it. I left her office with that same calm, but it didn't last long. That evening, my phone rang. Mom. I hesitated, then picked up. Odellen? Her voice was soft, sugary. I hadn't heard it since the dinner, not since she let Vera humiliate me while she sipped Chardonnay and stared at her plate. We heard you've been asking around about the house, she began. Vera said you're upset. Honey, you're not thinking clearly right now. It's been a hard few weeks for you. There it was, sweet concern laced with poison. I didn't answer, just listened. Always listening. You know, when people are emotionally overwhelmed, they sometimes create problems that aren't there, she added gently. You've always been sensitive. I hung up. The next day, I drove to the house. I didn't call, I didn't knock, I walked in. Dad was in the living room, pretending to read the paper like it was 1983. Mom was folding napkins into swans for a brunch that didn't exist. The scent of lemon cleaner hung in the air. Fake. Sharp. Vera said you're stirring things up, Dad said without looking up. What's going on? You tell me, I said. Why is my name still on the mortgage, but Vera owns the deed? He blinked like he didn't understand English. Vera handled all that? We trusted her. Mom looked up. Sweetheart, we had no idea. Maybe this is just the stress talking, the job loss. You've had a lot on your plate. I'm fine, I said flatly. Well, that's why we called Dr. Murphy, she said, still folding napkins. He's willing to see you, just for a wellness check, nothing serious. My stomach dropped. You what? I asked. It's just concern, she said. You haven't been yourself. The next morning, my phone rang again. Hi, O'Dellin. This is Dr. Murphy's office. Your parents booked you for a stress evaluation. It's standard, just a brief intake. I went. Why? I don't know. Maybe some sliver of me still wanted to believe they cared. At the hospital intake lobby, I checked in. The receptionist handed me a clipboard. There's a release form for observation, she said. I stared at it. 2 pages. Legal language. Then I heard it. A whisper. A nurse passing behind me. You don't have to sign that unless you're here voluntarily. I looked up. The hallway lights suddenly felt too bright, the room too quiet. I stood. I placed the clipboard back on the desk without saying a word, turned around, and walked straight out the door. My hands were shaking when I dialed my lawyer's number. They're not just denying what they did, I said, my voice hoarse. They're trying to erase me. If they wanted to call me crazy, I'd show them what a sane woman with evidence can do. That thought still rang in my ears the following Monday morning as I walked into my attorney's office, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I just stepped in, dropped the thick accordion folder on the desk between us, and took a breath that filled my entire chest for the first time in weeks. Inside that folder, every receipt, every email, every payment stub from the mortgage I had made while my sister smiled for Facebook photos on vacation. There were emails from Vera, time-stamped, begging me to take care of the boring financial stuff because she was drowning in meetings. There were even birthday cards from my parents, thanking me for always coming through. My lawyer, Greg, glanced over the pile without touching it. Then he looked at me. This is more than enough, he said slowly. We'll draft a motion to freeze any transfers or claims on that property. Once the judge sees this, it's going to shift momentum fast. I nodded. There was no triumph in me, just something steadier. Clarity. I'd been gaslit into silence for years, told I was too emotional, too reactive. Now, my silence was intentional, and it was strategic. By Wednesday, the certified letters were out. One to Vera, one to my parents, and one to the notary who'd allowed a fraudulent signature to slide through unchecked. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post vague social media quotes about karma or loyalty. I just watched the tracking notifications on my phone. One by one, the green checks lit up beside each name. I didn't smile, but my hand stopped shaking. Friday afternoon, the knock came. I peeked through the peephole. A young man in a blazer stood on the other side with a large white envelope and a clipboard. Are you Miss O'Dellin Arliss? Yes. He handed me the envelope. You've been served. Have a good day. The words didn't hit until the door clicked shut. I slid my finger under the seal, my gut twisting. The pages inside were crisp and thick. The letterhead had Vera's attorney's name, bold and centered. The content? Countersuit. Plaintiff, Vera Arliss. Allegations, emotional distress, defamation, intentional harm, public slander. She was suing me. Me. I nearly laughed, until I saw the final clause, a request for an emergency gag order. They wanted me silenced. The woman who'd been erased from property records, who'd paid every cent and still got shoved off the dinner table. Now they were trying to legally shut me up, like I was some threat, like truth was noise they couldn't tolerate. I sank onto the couch, the papers slipping from my lap to the floor. I reached for my old journal. It had followed me through breakups, jobs lost, family holidays I showed up to with dishes I paid for and smiles I faked. Inside the back cover was a note I'd written to myself sometime last year. I didn't remember the exact day, but the handwriting was mine. If I ever forget who I am, read this. You've survived worse. Don't go quiet now. I let that line settle into my ribs. I wasn't loud by nature. I wasn't the kind to scream or shame or threaten, but I was the kind who kept records, who read the fine print, who noticed things. They hadn't expected me to fight. They certainly hadn't expected me to win. I looked up at the ceiling, the same ceiling I'd stared at the night I learned the house I bought didn't belong to me. "You wanted me quiet," I whispered. "Instead, you handed me a microphone." I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was a weather alert, maybe a storm rolling in, but when I grabbed it, I saw a dozen unread messages blinking like warnings. "Girl, are you okay? You're trending on Facebook right now, is this true? Oh, Dylan, what's going on? Call me." I sat up, heart pounding, and pulled my laptop onto my knees. The screen lit up, but what I saw dimmed everything inside me. A gossip blog post, tagged exclusive, was circulating like wildfire. The headline, "Woman Sues Her Own Family After Years of Loving Support." Beneath it, a blurry photo of me, taken years ago, standing outside St. Luke's Hospital, shoulders slumped, eyes red, clutching a folder. The caption twisted the moment. "Caught in a breakdown after allegedly being fired, now she's turning on her family?" There were other photos too. Cropped, dimly lit snapshots from who knows where. One of me sitting alone on a park bench, another from a family cookout years ago, frozen mid-argument. And then the comments, "Typical snowflake, can't handle life so she blames her family." Wow, suing your own parents? You can't buy that kind of entitlement. I heard she was unstable. That letter got leaked for a reason. Leaked letter? I opened a new tab, and there it was. A scanned version of my termination notice from the school board. Except this one wasn't the final HR-approved version. It was the earlier disputed draft, the one Vera had somehow seen, the one that implied inappropriate behavior without naming a cause, the one that had nearly broken me when I first saw it. I slammed the laptop shut and sat still, hands clenched in my lap. This wasn't just a smear. This was execution by innuendo. I was watching myself get erased in real time. "They didn't just want to silence me," I said aloud, voice low. "They wanted to erase me." I spent the rest of the morning curled on the couch, not crying, just quiet, like the air had left the room. By early afternoon, I forced myself to check my email. I expected more damage, more echoes of betrayal. Instead, I found a single message with the subject line, "I think I can help." The sender's name was unfamiliar, Marlene Crosby. The body of the message read, "You don't know me, but I worked with your sister. We need to talk. It's not just you." I hesitated for a moment, then replied. "We met that evening in a small corner cafe off Walnut Street, half an hour before closing. Marlene was already seated when I walked in, mid-40s, sharp eyes, tired smile. "You're braver than I was," she said, sliding her phone across the table. "But she's used this playbook before." On the screen were archived emails between Vera and another woman, a former colleague, threads full of flattery turned manipulation, suggestions to "let me handle the contract" or "just trust me, it's cleaner this way." Then came the gaslighting. Lines like, "You must have misunderstood. Are you sure you're remembering that right? Don't embarrass yourself trying to fight this." And finally, "No one's going to believe you anyway." Marlene looked up at me and said, "That last one, that's her signature line." I sat back, swallowing hard. "You saved these?" "I did," she nodded, "because I knew one day I'd need them, and so would someone else." I exhaled slowly, fingertips tapping against the mug in front of me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel weak. I felt seen. And more than that, I felt ready. 2 mornings after Marlene handed me that digital lifeline, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. No adrenaline, no panic, just focus. I made coffee, opened the blinds in my tiny apartment, and pulled out the stack of documentation I had started compiling that very night. The sunlight caught the edge of the folder. Mortgage documents, screenshots, emails, the hospital visit paperwork, the corrected HR letter from my old job, each one proof of something they'd hoped would stay buried or twisted. I didn't call a PR firm. I didn't script it. I sat down, propped my phone against a stack of cookbooks, and hit record. "You've read the posts. You've heard the whispers. But you haven't heard from me," I began, looking straight into the camera lens. No dramatics, no tears, just the truth. I told them everything. How I'd co-signed a mortgage to help my family during the recession. How Vera had later transferred the property into her name while leaving the debt under mine. How they tried to label me unstable when I started asking questions. How the job termination was twisted into something it never was. And how HR's own records corrected that narrative. Each claim I made, I backed with evidence on screen. I didn't need to shout to be heard. Calm, consistent truth has a volume of its own. When I hit upload, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few friends would see it. Maybe a local moms group would pass it around. By dinner, it had 60,000 views. By bedtime, it crossed 100,000. The hashtag started appearing like wildfire. Believe Odellin, silenced no more, not your bank mom. The comment section turned into a place I never expected, solidarity. Women I didn't know shared how their siblings tricked them out of inheritances, how their adult children forged signatures, how no one believed them until it was too late. "You are what strength looks like after betrayal," one woman wrote. Another, "I'm 64, and I've never seen someone tell the truth so plainly. Thank you." I was invited to speak on a podcast the next morning. Voices over 40? Then another. Then one focused on financial justice. I didn't ask for any of it. I just told the truth. Vera, of course, couldn't let that stand. She released a video of her own, defensive, shaky, full of vague accusations and passive-aggressive jabs. She said things like, "I was just trying to help her," and "Some people twist reality to play victim." It didn't land. Comments rolled in faster than she could delete them. "This reeks of guilt. She sounds like a teenager trying to avoid grounding." I believe the woman with the receipts. Then came Marlene. She went public, with texts, with timestamps, with her own story. Another woman Vera had tried to ruin when things didn't go her way. The pattern was undeniable. A former colleague stepped forward, screenshots of Vera mocking me in group chats, laughing at how easily they'd believe anything she says if you cry a little. Even someone from inside the mortgage lender, anonymously, leaked internal confirmations. I had funded the down payment. My name was still on the debt. Vera had used forged paperwork to push the change through. My phone buzzed constantly, but I didn't celebrate. I posted one thing, just one line, white text on a black background. "When you plant lies, don't be surprised when the garden turns on you." I went to sleep that night, not triumphant, but still. Steady. For once, I felt like the storm was outside of me, not inside. I wasn't done yet. The courthouse didn't feel like a place for revenge. It felt like a quiet reckoning. I stepped out of the car that morning dressed plainly, but with something no one in my family had seen in me for years: resolve. My heels clicked across the concrete as I walked with my attorney toward the filing office. No camera crews, no protest signs, just the calm before a storm they didn't know was coming. "For years," I said, almost to myself as we waited at the elevator, "I paid the taxes, I maintained the records, I kept receipts, and they thought my silence meant surrender." We entered the clerk's office. My attorney handed over the motion we'd drafted together over weeks. It wasn't for defamation or emotional harm or the social media chaos. This was bigger. It was a formal petition to reclaim the full title and deed to the home my parents currently occupied, based on documents buried in a decade-old estate transfer from my godmother's trust. Hidden within the paperwork was a clause stating that if I provided financial support for 5 continuous years, which I had quietly through property tax payments and repair receipts, the house would legally belong to me in full. The clause had a date, it had signatures, it was ironclad. I hadn't even looked at the house in years. But now, it was the symbol of every favor twisted into leverage, every dinner turned into judgment, every lie turned against me. That house carried my name long before they decided to erase me from their story. By noon, certified letters had reached both my parents and Vera. My attorney confirmed they'd signed for them. The group chat I hadn't opened in months suddenly buzzed. First came Vera. "You can't do this," she typed. "You promised you'd never touch that clause. You signed off emotionally. You said it was theirs." I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment before typing, "You also promised you'd never weaponize me." Then I closed the chat, not caring if they saw it. I didn't need them to. The court would. That evening, someone leaked the deed, my deed, onto a Reddit thread that had been following the drama. Within hours, my name was trending again, but this time, not as the unstable daughter or the bitter woman taking her family to court. This time, the headline read, "Mother cut off, kicked out, now reclaims everything she quietly funded." People dug up old posts from my family's accounts, photos of house remodels, vacations taken under the caption, "Our home, our legacy." Comments beneath those photos now said things like, "She built that legacy, they just lived in it." Even the local news station picked it up. A brief interview aired with my attorney, standing on the steps of the courthouse, explaining the legal grounds of the trust. The anchor's final words sealed it. "This isn't a woman destroying her family. It's a woman finally drawing the line." 3 nights later, I heard pounding on my condo lobby door. My phone lit up with a message from security. "She says she's family, wants to see you." I looked at the screen. "Vera." I stepped onto my balcony just in time to see her being escorted out. Her voice cut through the evening air like a blade dipped in acid. "You think money makes you better? You think you've won? You're still nothing without us." I didn't shout back. I didn't flinch. I just let my voice carry down to her like the last truth she hadn't swallowed yet. "That house you're screaming about? It was in my name before your wedding day." She froze, and I turned and walked inside. And still, even after everything, part of me asked, could I ever really let go of them? I sat at my kitchen table, morning light pouring through the windows of my new place. The air smelled faintly of wisteria from the vines blooming just outside. For the first time in months, maybe years, I could hear my own breathing. There was peace in that. Then the knock came. A delivery envelope, postmarked 2 weeks ago. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. My mother's. I stood there for a long moment, the paper warm from the sun. Then I opened it. No apology, no remorse, just a single sentence. "We're your family, and family doesn't cut ties." I folded the letter slowly and placed it under my coffee cup. I didn't need to read the rest. I'd spent most of my adult life reading between their lines. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a leash. They wanted access again. Not to me, but to the version of me that never said no. That afternoon, I drove to the old house, the one I fought to reclaim, the one I grew up in, the one that had become a battleground and then just 4 walls and a roof. It was empty now. The keys had been returned, the furniture cleared out. The echo of my own footsteps followed me as I walked through each room, but there were no ghosts. Not anymore. In the kitchen, I left a folder on the counter. Inside, a signed document. I donated the house to a local domestic violence shelter. On the cover, I'd written in ink, "Build safety here, where mine was never welcome." As I stepped out the front door, the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Dale, watched from her porch, her dog at her feet, her eyes soft. "Didn't think you'd ever come back," she said. I smiled, hand on my car door. Only to give it a better ending. I didn't need to slam the door. I didn't need to burn anything down. I just needed to close it, gently and finally. Back home, I stood by the garden that came with the new place. The wind had knocked loose a branch, and something caught the sunlight beneath it. I knelt, and there it was. A silver pendant, the one my mother gave me when I was 11. It had been tucked in an old sweater I'd packed from the house. In Chapter 1, I remembered tossing it into a drawer after she'd called it childish. Now, I tied it to a branch above the garden path. "I used to think love looked like sacrifice," I whispered, voice low against the breeze. "Now I know. Real love never demands your silence." That night, I sat with a glass of tea and opened the last page of my journal. No more plotting, no more proving, just this. I used to beg for a seat at their table, even when it cost me every piece of myself. But the moment I stood up, I realized I could build my own. So no, I don't hate them. I don't need revenge. Because healing isn't about making others suffer. It's about choosing not to. And to the ones still wondering, Have you ever been called ungrateful just because you stopped letting them use you? Tell me your story. I'm listening. Some people call it family. But sometimes it's just a cycle of silence, guilt, and control until you break it. Have you ever had to walk away just to finally breathe? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and quiet revenge in the heart of family drama.